that was under the property already of our grandfather Giuseppe, and invest everything in the high quality viticulture and high quality winemaking. So that's the story of our father, and basically how the winery was started in 1980s. With the first label of our most important wine, which is a Barolo Conca, so single vineyard Barolo. That proves also how clear was in his mind the path of our winery, so with making single vineyard Barolos.
Okay. Valentina, I'm going to go back to you, and I'm going to put up a picture of your cellars. You tell me exactly when this photo is from. And I want to know about Barolo back then. I mean, Barolo is certainly, you know, an iconic wine these days. It's always been a very famous wine, a very distinguished wine. But I understand that, I mean, it's certainly not like today, back in the 20s or 30s or 40s. And I understand that Dolcetto, another native variety, was very important back then. And it sold a lot more Dolcetto back then, and a lot more prestige back then than it does today. So what was the state of Barolo like back, you know, this picture is from when?
Well, so this would be, I would say, around the 40s, 50s. Yeah. So it's funny to see how the evolution of Barolo, also in fame, changed very much. As a matter of fact, before Barolo was born, wine was more similar probably to the Lambrusco that the father of Martina and Matteo used to make, because it was an unstable wine. So sparkling, and eventually a little sweet because it still had a nice residual sugar. So really different from the Barolo that we imagine today as the big important wine to be matched with really tasty meals. This was, of course, before Giulietta arrived, and after, when cellars were then built underground and barrels were made so that the fermentation could be completed. This beautiful, strong, still wine that we enjoy today was born. And at the time, of course, it was a very distinguished wine, really rich in taste. Not that now is not, but today is probably much finer, much more elegant than what it used to be back in the days. So it was a wine that was supposed to be enjoyed with very strong meals. Also, cuisine has changed much in the years. In the 50s, we can think of these very tasty, gamey dishes, which weren't for everyone, but eventually for an exclusive niche of families, which were gathering in occasion, which were quite formal. So Barolo was supposed to be matched with these very tasty dishes that also implied very long cooking times. So definitely not a meal that you could consume every day. So therefore, Barolo was considered an exclusive important wine for the occasions, and usually occasion linked to religious moments such as weddings or Easter, Christmas time, or birthdays or so. So of course it was the wine of the occasions, while Dolcetto, as it is still today, was really considered, because of its more humble nature, a wine for every moment, very versatile, to be matched with everyday cuisine. While talking with Dad, because I've been asking him, Dad, can you tell me a little bit more about Dolcetto being so famous back in the days? Beside this very obvious answer, he made a present. He told me that at the time, also very important families from Turin, especially the ladies from these important families in Turin, used to come here in the Lang, in the Monferrato area, to treat herself and treat her skin by eating Dolcetto grapes, because of the properties of the grape that had, of course, that has still today, of course, softer tannins rather than Nebbiolo, and a much more mitigate acidity. So could be consumed easily, and definitely made the skin appear more healthy and cleaner and nicer than not treating it with by eating this grape.
That's fascinating.
We should go back eating a lot of Dolcetto.
Right. Yeah. That's why everyone there looks so good. But I'd heard that before. That's fascinating. And I understand you could even go to the pharmacy and get certain treatments with dolcetto for your skin and things like that. That's neat. Well, obviously there weren't this wasn't the same number of tourists today as back then as it was today. But how many producers, when you purchased the wine, your Pietro Abbona, which is your father's great uncle, correct? He purchased the winery in 1929. How many Barolo produced? I know there were a lot of growers. Things have changed over the years where there were so many growers and only a few wineries. How many wineries were producing Barolo back then?
Well, I would say that it was a handful of producers linked specifically to the town of Barolo and of course the nearby area. So gradually in time, things have changed quite much from growers. They became winemakers, and then after that, producer that used to also sell the wine. So it's a process that happened in different phases. Of course, there were a few wineries that used to do all three processes at the same time already back then, but it was really a very limited number. So there were also less opportunities of enjoying Barolo wines that are, as today, so specific, so linked also to single vineyard concept, which back then was not even so searched for, because there wasn't, first of all, the request, but there was not even the offer, because it was just few people that were getting grapes from many different parcels and from many different places, so to show what their general production was. So there's been a really nice and interesting opportunity of evolution in time, which we're all benefiting from today.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll talk more about that. I want to talk a lot about the classic Barolo that you produced for years and still do, and as does Molino, as well as single vineyards. So one example of, well, here's a label of an older bottle. You were very, very kind my last visit to let me have access to an older bottle, which I still have at home, and it's the 1955. And you can see that I love that label, the Antichi Poderi dei Marchesi di Barolo, già opera via Barolo, and they're all the Grand Prix labels, everything. And you can see that's the classic label. Everything back then, by the way, the 1955 was terrific. When I got the wine from you at the winery, this was 2018. So the wine was, if my math is correct, 63 years old, and I enjoyed it with another producer at their restaurant, which happened to be a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Alba. And the producer knew what the vintage was, but when he tasted it, he thought the wine was 25 years old, not 63 years old. It had great freshness to it. And one other note on that is that for all of you watching today or watching on the recording that I'll post in a few days, on the site marchesidibarolo.com, they have a listing of vintages from all the way back from the 1860s. Not every vintage, a few of them are skipped, but you can, those of you that really need to study the history of Barolo and find out what a particular year was like, they have an excellent, and it's divided, I think, into 5 different pages. So all the way up to 2013. It needs to be updated, but we'll work on that. But that's really nice.
Thank you for reminding me that.
Okay, well, I'll help if you'd like, but that's a nice tool. I think there's one other winery I know that does that, but very few people do that in that much detail. So that's a great way of doing it. And 55, you said, was just kind of a one crown year. I thought it was better than that. So, but anyway, maybe we'll change 55 as well. But back then everything was. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you, but this is what is surprising about Barolo, that it doesn't have an evolution which follows a line. It's all about up and downs. So it's the beauty of having a bottle in front of you, which you can't really predict how it's going to taste, but surely it will be a beautiful experience, doesn't matter what.
Martina and Matteo, let me ask you, I probably never had this one, maybe you did, but the older Barolos you've had, and this is a question that comes up, and we'll cover it in greater depth. The older Barolos certainly took a lot longer to come around. The Barolos of today are a little more forward. And the question is always, do the Barolos of today, do they age as long? And I guess some of that remains to be seen. But what is your answer to that?
I personally think that, that Barolo can age for a very, very long time, and still can age for a very, very long time, of course. The Barolo has maintained his personality in the years. I think has changed a little bit the style for a few reasons. Because everything is an evolution, and that's the beauty of the life and the beauty of everything. The second is the climate that is changing in the last years. So that is getting is an easier climate for the winemaker than was 40, 50 years ago. I remember our father was graduated at the Norwegian school in 1973, and he is always repeat us, remember that 45, 50 years ago were like 2, 3 very, very nice vintage every decade. Mm-hmm. And normally, if you check in deep this kind of vintage, you see that were great, but the production was very, very, very low because there were so many problems from the climate that gets some problem. In the last 20 years, we had a lot of good vintage because the climate is a little bit warmer, so in a perfect way. At the moment, is a perfect climate for Barolo. This time, from 2010 to 2020, we had 9 fantastic vintage. I mean, it's quite incredible. And the third reason, I think, is also that there are more wineries, so there are more competition, and more great competition. And that's very important because if I taste the Valentina wines and say, wow, this is incredible, I want to make a very good wine, and try to this natural good competition that let grow the area very much, work better than in the past in the vineyard, so I have more beautiful grapes, and that of course gets more stable quality of the wine. But I personally think that the aging potential of the Barolo of these years can be very, 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 very good. I mean, can have a very, very long aging potential. Of course, we need to check in a long time. But
of course, right. Sure. There's always some talk that always thought that maybe with climate change, it can go too far. And we used to see Barolos that were 13.5, 14. Lately, there have been many that have been 14.5 alcohol. Occasionally, I haven't seen too many that are at 15, but are we going, is the alcohol level going too high? Is it getting too hot in certain years? I mean, I know there's ways you can manage that in the vineyard and also in the cellar, but what is your thought on that?
I think that every producer especially in the last 10 years, has realized, studied, is thinking a lot about that. So our work for the future in terms of winemaker is really to do something for that. Do something for that. What means? Of course, we cannot change the climate. We have not the power to change something because it is a too long-term changing. But what we can do in our state, and we do since a few years, is really to work more in the vineyard, dedicate more time there to just leave all the field, doesn't cut the herb too often, do the cover crop, try to leave all the water there, and that's very important for the erosion, because another problem that we had in the last years was, of course, warmer temperature, but of course, big shade, big quantity of water in an hour. So that was a very, very big problem. So there are so many agronomic practices that are very, very important to do, and I think everybody in the area is doing more and more. That I think will save a lot to the Barolo for many, many years. So that's extremely important.
Valentina, what have you noticed about climate change? When did you and your family and your viticultural team first notice climate change?
Well, I don't think that there is one year in which you think everything has changed. It's been a slight change that brought us today to more extreme weather conditions. But as Matteo perfectly said, we can have some great benefits from this new situation in which we are finding ourselves. So it's a matter of opportunities. Today, surely we are more prepared than before. We have more studies to rely on coming from the past, some bad experiences that you can avoid because you did them already.
Right.
And surely opportunities which can be taken because you are ready, you're more well knowledged. As Matteo said, there are some agricultural practices that allow us today to take advantage of every situation, even the most difficult one and the most extreme one, that can really help us to do our job better and better, having, as you said very well, wines which can still age perfectly, but you can enjoy them even earlier because they're already cleaner as soon as we release them on the market. So we have an even greater window of time to enjoy them.
Okay, let's talk about, I want to talk about terroir. I've got some beautiful pictures of the vineyards that you work with, both producers. But let's first talk about, to make sure we stay on the topic of the history of Barolo, the aging, that bottle I showed before, the 1955. For years, everything was matured in Slavonian oak, in grandi botti, which were 30, 35 hectoliter, which is 3,000, 3,500 liters, or even larger. And then I know today you use barrique in certain cases. I don't know if you used to know, but tell us how that gradual change came about, specifically from Marchesi di Barolo.
Well, so I think that this change started from the better knowledge that we have, and also from the evolution in the management of the vineyard that Matteo brought up earlier. In fact, now we have no less than 5,000 plants per hectare, while before there was a much lower number of plants, which allow us today to have a greater fruit to start with. And that takes into account the ripening of the polyphenolic components in a better way. So the evolution also of cellar techniques have led us to introduce machines for fermentation, which gradually substituted the handwork that was the only tool used back then. So we modified little by little the process prior to having wine into the barrel, so to allow us today to have a finer wine already to start with. The process is no more empiric. As I said, our mistakes, we did them and we learned from them. So it's not based just on traditions, but right. The process is modulated according to the juice that we work with. So the wine that comes from a specific vineyard rather than another one. So all of these elements have to be taken into consideration when we talk about evolution also in winemaking style. So we already have noble juice. And this led us to have juices, wines, which have a different demand of oxygen. And consequently, we had to modify the approach that we use in the cellar, directing choices regarding the range of barrels that we have in the cellar in using two different guidelines. So at the beginning of the vinification, this is our personal approach. As we try to vinify parcel per parcel, we use a smaller barrel, so with lower capacity, of course, for the first year of aging in wood, so to have a greater supply of oxygen to stabilize the color and the tannins and the early tannins, so at the very beginning. Then in the second and the third year of aging, we transfer these the wine that is in the smaller barrels into bigger and bigger ones according to the performance of each of the smaller ones, so to give a more delicate supply of oxygen and tannins to the wood, and also according to the final objective which we are searching for, which are searching to reach. So if we are looking at a specific single vineyard, we might use smaller barrels for a longer period of time. While if we are looking at the more classic blend, we will start from medium size and then work with the very big barrels, which, go up all the way to 195 hectoliters in our cellar. So we really have a quite wide range, starting from Barrique and Tonneau, or even greater, so 30, 60, 90, 185 hectoliters is and you mentioned before classic Slavonian oak, like if it's equal to big barrel. So even in the big barrel, sometimes we prefer French wood, so traditional barrel, neutral but made of French wood, because we feel like it is more favorable for our vineyards.
And I understand there are many producers that also use Austrian oak, such as Stockinger and their Botti as well. So yeah, that's changed as well. So Matteo, Martina, your father made his first Barolo in 1982. And at that point in the late 70s and early 80s, there was a group known as the Barolo Boys, or as a lot of the producers are telling me, Barolo Boys, very quickly. And they had a different philosophy about how to make Barolo. They thought that maybe Barolo made it in a traditional way, which was a glorious wine, just maybe they weren't attracting enough customers. Explain that movement to me and tell me what, was your father part of that? I don't see his name listed too often, but he certainly made wines, right in that, when that era came around. And what were his thoughts on that?
Yeah, so yes, the time was exactly that one. So the start of this movement of young producers that wanted to change the way of making wine from the past. It was at the beginning was really an extreme movement. No, when you want to change things and you are young, you do it in an extreme way. So it's in every time is also in different aspects. So regarding our father, I was part of this group. He's always been one of probably the most shy of the Barolo Boys. Okay. So, more in a moderate way because he's part of his character. But you are absolutely right. So the 80s, like the early 80s, was really a big period of changing in many ways here in the Langhe. So the idea was basically to find a new way to make these Barolos. Started by first of all, the idea was to introduce more the single vineyard Barolo, so exalt the characteristic of each individual terroir, the potential of each individual single vineyard, and I really guess at this point was really what our father wanted to do. So was really clear in his mind how important was to keep separate the production of the single vineyards, because it was so fascinating by the soil and how the terroir can reflect the differences in style. Okay. And that's
let me stop you for just 1 second. I just have one other question. Was part of the reason that the Barolo Boys wanted to make changes, did that have to do with, at the time, California wines were becoming very popular in the market? I mean, not so much in Italy, but just...
I don't think so. I don't think it was really related to that here, because especially back in the days, we were not so international as we are right now. Probably it was more like a look into the French style of producing wine. So it was very common of young, small producers from Langhe, from Piemonte, going to visit Burgundian producers for study how they make the wine back in the days. So there was a lot of research relative to the French producer. So that was probably one of the best kind of wine trip back in these days. No? But first of all, I think the idea was really that, so to exalt the single vineyard style. Then, of course, at the beginning, what was very important for this type of philosophy was to stop to do very long maceration on the skin for many, many weeks, stop using like the very old casks from Slovenian oak that was very, very used more like the grandfathers or fathers. So that was the idea of breaking the rules from the past. And what happened is that, especially at the beginning with this movement, introduced more the using of the barriques in general. But I guess maybe at these days in the early 80s, also the use of the oak, I admit, and also our father said to us, was kind of extreme in some way, you know, because when you start over with something new, you start, of course, without experience, as Valentina said as well. So if you don't have experience in something, it's very unusual that you do things right at the first shot. So it just takes time. So from there, I guess right now our winery philosophy have changed quite a bit, but just due to the experience, I think. So we do have right now 40 harvests in our own winery history, and now we know our vines better. We know which kind of oak we want to use for our different vineyards. We are absolutely convinced that for our winemaking philosophy, the using of the French oak is the best, also for the big barrels. So we are using big barrels for the classic Barolo, for example. We are not aging barrique, but we are using French oak, almost neutral, so non-toast oak right now, something that obviously at the beginning was a completely different way of vinification. And I guess you can feel it also in the wines. So the wines have changed quite a bit. So if you try some of our wine from the early 90s, are completely different than the wines that we are making right now. But I guess it's also part of the history and the evolution as well.
Exactly. Valentina, let me go back to you. You were kind enough to send me 2 bottles of wine. I'll put the photos up, and they represent 2 different styles. Barolo from you is to how they're aged. So the first one was the 2014 Canubi, and I don't have the picture of the vineyard, but there's the bottle, but everybody knows Canubi. Tell us about this vineyard. You've told me some stories before. I guess the word comes from Cannubio, which is sort of a joint, like a marriage in a way. Because this is very famous because of its soils, correct?
Yeah. So I can actually show it to you on the map that I have right here, and Davide joined us.
Hey there, okay. Thank you.
Vieni anche tu. Okay. So this is Canubi. As you can see, very central. I don't know if this works, but I think
that works fine. And we're in the commune of Barolo.
We are in the commune of Barolo, which is basically this area here. So very central to the winemaking area. And probably you can see it because this is a 3D map, but you can see how Canubi is kind of low if compared to the higher hills of La Morra, where Matteo and Martina are. And also of Castiglione Falletto, of Monforte, Novello. So Barolo sits in this sort of bowl. As a matter of fact, the name Barolo means in our dialect low rise place, because it's 100 or so meters lower compared to the other villages. So in the town of Barolo, Davide, I think you can sit. Yeah. There is always a very thank you. A very well-protected microclimate, which of course influences a lot the expression of the Nebbiolo grown in the vineyards of Barolo. And referring specifically to Canubi, which is really surrounded by these high hills, the microclimate really impacts in Canubi. Another beauty of this vineyard, which is so known all over the world, that I believe that this is the reason why sometimes we think that the name refers to this connubio, meeting and marriage in older Italian, is because in Canubi you can actually find a very diversified soil type. You can find the free Marne di Sant'Agata type of soils, which are typical of the Barolo area overall. But in Canubi, all 3 of them are a present.
Present, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes words don't come to me. Do you want to continue, Davide?
Yeah, because we see that
When you say the, I'm sorry, when you say the all three, you mean the Helvetian and the Cerevalian, right?
all the three at the same time. Yeah,
Okay.
because in Canube Hill you can find on the top più sciolto,
The more soft,
the more soft and sandy kind of Marne di Sant'Agata fossili. So that's why our wines, our grapes that are vested from that hill are so balanced. Then in the middle, you will find another kind of Marne di Sant'Agata fossili, which is the sealed Marne di Sant'Agata fossili. That's why we also find a great structure of wine in that hill. At the end, in Canube, you also find
at the bottom.
At the bottom, yes, sorry, you will find also clay Marne di Sant'Agata fossili. So that's the real reason you find the wines from that hill so balanced, because they've got all the features that you can obtain from different kind of soil. You can find the elegance,
the elegance,
the elegance
of course,
and balance, and also the power due to the soil characteristic, and that's why the hill of Canube is so amazing for us, because it can let you make a very great kind of wine. So we think that, because and that's why Canube is so important for us.
Right. And now, what is the elevation again of your vineyards in Canube?
It's about in Canube is really low. It's about 230, 250. It's meters
above sea level.
Okay, so we're talking about 750 feet above sea level, something like that, 800 feet. And according to Alessandro Masnaghetti, the vineyard itself, and there are many different Canube, there's Canube Boschis, Canube Moscatel, other things. It's 19.5 hectares total size of the vineyard, which is just a little more than 48 acres. How much of Canube do you own?
We own around 3 hectares overall in Canube. So it's
Okay.
Considered the small size of the vineyard is quite a big portion of it. But still, as each parcel is a little bit different due to the exposure, the position itself, and what Davide was saying, the 3 different soil types that characterize it, and however are in slightly different portions between one and the other. We vinify each parcel separately, and then just later we will blend them into those larger and larger barrels, as we were mentioning just in the previous question.
Okay, we just had a question from one of the attendees about, do you know how many producers are in Canube? How many producers make a Canube Barolo? That number always seems to change.
As my memory goes, we are around 30.
I was going to say around 30. So yeah, I've got, the Bible here, Alessandro, my friend, everybody knows Alessandro, and he has a list of all of them. So I will, count that up and put that in, but I think it's right around 30, right? So now for that wine, as you mentioned before why you do it, but it's a combination of, this is the 2014 I tried, and you have a combination of part Slavonian oak, 30 to 35 hectoliter.
And yes, starting into smaller barrels and then going into larger ones, both Slavonian and French not toasted.
Okay, now you have several other single vineyards. The other wine you sent me, we'll put up the picture here, was the Reserva from, I think
2011.
Well, I don't have it, but I can see if I can find it. But your Reserva Barolo, you may have a bottle there, okay?
Right here. Makes it easier.
Yes, thank you. Hold that up again for just a second. Just
sorry.
See it. Right. Okay. Yeah. That's the exact one I had. So now that one you only use Slavonian oak.
Only bigger barrel.
Right. So why the decision on that?
Well, it's a different style because of the different nature of these wines and the different concept that they represent. Of course, the single vineyard is a focus. It's a very concentrated and exclusive representation of a tiny piece of land, because even though it's around 19 hectares, Canubi is still a very little piece of the of earth in the planet. So in order to specify and show the great richness that Canubi has due to the very rich soil that Davide mentioned earlier, we feel like using smaller barrels at the beginning can really allow us to extract better the tannins, to fix the color better, and somehow round up a little bit this great power that Canubi shows. And while this is not, we don't feel is needed into our Riserva.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but so for the Canubi or Sormaso or one of your single vineyards, you use small barriques to make a little bit more of a statement of identity. Would that be correct?
Exactly.
To
To show the identity of that specific vineyard, because otherwise we feel it will be so squared that it will be difficult to be enjoyed. So we believe that using barrique at the beginning can allow us to fix more the identity and to round up a little bit the strength of it, so that it can be enjoyed.
Okay.
While for the Riserva, as well as our traditional Barolo, our classic Barolo, which is born by blending together vineyards which are quite different one from the other, this balance, this harmony, this equilibrium, which it's already found in the single vineyard, if in our opinion managed in a certain way, here is found by mixing and matching. So Riserva, it's more of a thought through expression of Barolo, which allow us to talk about the appellation in general and not a specific vineyard within the appellation. So in a certain way, it's a more neutral expression of Barolo, and therefore approach that we use on this wine, because this mixing and matching of very strong vineyards with others which have a more soft and balanced profile already allow us to find this beautiful equilibrium and delicacy which Barolo can show.
Okay.
Plus, looking specifically at Riserva, is aged for not just one extra year in barrels, but we come out with Riserva after minimum 8, if not 9 in this case, years from the harvest. So of course,
2011, the most current Riserva?
Right. This is our current one. We just switched to 2012.
Okay.
Like, I mean, we are about to switch now.
Okay, fine.
So,
Is that I've received wines from many producers that have 2015 Riserva. So interesting. Two quick questions. To go back to Martina and Matteo, but one gentleman here asks is if you ever blend any Canubi into your traditional Riserva Barolo.
sorry.
Is the Canubi just
For us or for Martina?
No, for you.
Sorry.
Okay, so eventually some grapes from Canubi could be within our Riserva in certain vintages. So there's not an exact formula when it comes to Riserva. It's more, picking grapes from several places throughout the region, estate vineyards in the region. So to show the overall complexity, yet this might seem nonsense, but complexity, yet also delicacy that Barolo area shows, because as we have very powerful vineyards, we also have some very soft and sandy ones. So by mixing and matching, we really show the overall panorama of Barolo.
Okay, and then just a 20-second answer, because we have to save time for Matteo here, but my friend Manuel Bergi, who you probably know. Manuel, how are you? Thank you for joining us. It's a question for you about, you have a winery in Barbaresco called Cascina Brusciata. He wants to know what is the relationship of Marchesi di Barolo to Cascina Brusciata.
So just to make it very short, is a relationship we started many years ago, because as Marchesi di Barolo, we used to buy grapes from the buyer family and
right.
have a Barbaresco Rio Sordo. In 2016, we then bought the estate from the family. So today it belongs to our family, and it will be Davide's challenge to show Barbaresco in his way. So this is a whole to be project.
Okay, thank you. Matteo and Martina, let's talk about some of the vineyards you work with. And I'll put up a picture here. You make, I believe, 5 different Barolos, right? 1 classic and 4 single vineyard, correct?
Yes, so we make 4 single vineyard and 1 classic. What we want to represent with our Barolo is the terroir of La Morra. I mean, La Morra for us represent our village, but is also our style of winemaking, because La Morra, as also Barolo, is in the Tortonian side of Barolo. I mean, where the soil and the microclimate gets normally a little bit more elegant and fruity and aromatic Barolo. So La Morra for us represent a lot. The vineyard that we are seeing in the picture is Conca. Conca is one of our 4 single vineyard, and for sure is the vineyard that more represents us, because our grandfather bought the farm in 1853 and bought the farm mainly for Conca. Conca is one of the smallest single vineyard in the Barolo denomination, and we own 0.4 hectare. And since 1982, we make this single vineyard, because it was the first single vineyard our father made in 1982. So it's really, really, really important to exalt this single vineyard, and for us it's also is a fun to taste the difference between the different single vineyard. That's for us really one of the real beauty of Barolo, to have a difference between the terroir and just taste the vineyard that are very, very close to, and see how different can be. For example, we have Conca and Bricolucciani that are at the border and are like 150 meters apart. And when you taste the wine, you really see the difference between one vineyard to the other. And from the analysis of the soil, there is like 8-9% more sandy soil in Bricolucciani than Conca. I mean, that's really interesting, I think, for us and also for our client and for people who love Barolos, just to see, to try and to find that the vineyard they like more than the single vineyard that gets more emotion to
Conca, I mean, according to Masnaghetti, this is the smallest MGA we would normally call vineyards in all of Barolo. It's only about a little more than 6 acres large, and there's only 3 of you that produce wine from there. 2 other producers. In Italian, it means shell. So you can see kind of that shell or that amphitheater kind of shape. I'll put up a different picture here of, if I can find it, of La Serra, which you also make. And La Serra is also, it's a little bit different part of La Morra. You're in a little hamlet called Annunziata, which is where Conca is. And
yes, so it's a completely different area. So,
right. So this is La Serra, which means greenhouse, because it's situated so high. It's just above Brunate. So it's
yes.
a different type of terroir there, isn't it?
They are completely different in style. Yes, absolutely. So Conca is actually in the Annunziata area. So we are in the lower part of La Morra. Is roughly about 240 meters altitude-wise, while La Serra is about 350. So we are in the higher part of La Morra. This is a completely different vineyard style due to the elevation mainly. And also La Serra gets quite a bit of protection from the surrounding hills. So in this area, there is a sort of kind of a warm microclimate. So that's why La Serra is always the wine that we make that is probably more austere compared to the other Barolos, just because the nature and the style of this vineyard is so diverse from the others that we make. This is actually the newest in terms of single vineyard that we make. So the first vintage was 2010. So we were so much surprised on how different was to make La Serra compared to Bricolucciani, Conca, or Gallinotto, that are the other single vineyards that we have, because it's just a completely different animal. So it's a very different Barolo from what we are used to in La Morra. And to me, it reminds me more probably a Barolo from Monforte, Serralunga in style. So it's a Barolo that you need to have time, so to maybe keep it away for some time and enjoy it after some years. So it's a very diverse expression of a vineyard in La Morra. We have also to say that La Morra is a bigger municipality for production of Barolo. So you do have a lot of diversity from vineyards to vineyards because the elevation changed quite a bit, such as the soil type and the exposure. So it's pretty interesting, and we feel very fortunate to have all the single vineyards in the La Morra municipality in order to give a great example of how the single vineyards are performing in this commune that obviously is so important to us.
Great. We'll go a few minutes over the hour since we started late, but two questions for everyone here. And I had several people ask me about terroir. You just started to mention that. Master Chow, talk about the difference between, now we're talking about Barolo and La Morra, and in a very general broad term, they both have Helvetian soils, which are younger soils, unlike the soils in Serralunga or in Monforte, which are older. I know you don't make wines from there, but if both of you started to talk about it, Martina, the difference between Barolo and La Morra communes, and Valentina, if you can also talk about that, and if you could also talk about Barolo La Morra versus Serralunga Monforte, the style of Barolo.
Yeah, so actually it's nice that we are doing this webinar together, because La Morra and Barolo are probably two of the most similar areas for production of Barolo in style, I would say. So they are very diverse due to the type of soil, so geologically wise. So we are seeing like there is basically like a cut into different macro area into the Barolo. We have to see it this way. There is in one part Barolo and La Morra. So where we are located is La Morra, and where Valentina and Davide are is Barolo. And then there are Monforte, Serralunga d'Alba, Castiglione, Falletto, that are so different because we are seeing like older soil type in that part where Serralunga, Monforte, and Castiglione are located versus younger soil type in La Morra and Barolo. Especially in our area and the vineyards that we do have, we are seeing a lot of like calcareous soil, Marle di Sant'Agato soil, so in many parts of Annunziata as well. And we do have some vineyards such as Bricolucciani and Conca, where there are also a tiny bit of sandy soil. So from where really the gentle style, the perfumey style of the Barolo comes from. And also the softness of tanning. So La Morra is recognized for being a very gentle and elegant Barolo style, but also that doesn't mean that the Barolo from this area can age. They actually can, and they do it very well. The only thing is that they are probably a little bit readier from the beginning. So they are very gastronomic to me, So. Right. Sometimes I really feel that the people, generally speaking, tend to be very intimidated by the Barolo. And maybe when they first approach from a Barolo from La Morra or either Barolo, they are very surprised because they are not expecting such a finesse and elegance into the wine. And that's, I guess, one of the most beautiful aspects of our area. Yeah, if I have to say.
Great. A quick question, and again, we're short on time, so this is for Martina and Matteo, but from Manuel, and just a 30-second answer, please. But he said, would you like to make a Barolo from outside of La Morra, and if in what commune or MGA, and why?
Of course, will be something interesting, but something maybe in the future. At the moment, we really want to focus on the vineyard we have and try to find to exalt more and more the quality of our vineyard. Okay. In the future would be, of course, a dream, but at the moment we want to focus on our vineyard.
Great. Valentina and Davide, a quick question on terroir, and then if you can follow up on what Martina said, and also, well, if you can answer, and then we'll go back to Martina and Matteo, and then we'll wind up with one more question. But when I tasted the 2016 Barolos last year, which was an outstanding year, there were so many great classic Barolos, and I want to emphasize, if you could just tell everybody how valuable those wines are, how important those wines are, that they're not lesser in quality than the single vineyard wines. Because I know that's the history of Barolo, are the wines that are blended from many vineyards. And both of you make an excellent one. So tell us a little bit about classic Barolo and the need for that, and what those wines represent.
Well, classic Barolo stands for tradition, stands for history, stands for comprehensive expression of all of this diversity that very well Martina was able to synthesize in just a few words. Is difficult. And, in the question that you did to Matteo, if you want to explore outside, it's already sometimes it's so difficult to explore what we have in our little communes, because the diversity is incredibly rich. So these expressions, more classic, more traditional, which are blends of Nebbiolo from different places within the appellation, allow us to do exactly that, to explore a little bit from the outside, and then come together to a picture which can be expressive for all of it. So it's to me, it's really like a puzzle, like creating a puzzle. We shape every single piece, and then we put it next to the other in order to recreate the picture of Barolo appellation rather than the commune, if you're looking at a menzione geografica aggiuntiva comunale. So these Barolo, besides being historical and tradition, they also send a greater message, a more comprehensive message. And of course, they are traditional in history, because at the very beginning, when Barolo was born, people didn't have that sophisticated palate to, first of all, pay attention to single vineyard. It is more a need today, where we are looking for surprising ourselves and discovering something new every time. And we have also more knowledge to address data and this more demanding palette. But back in the days, this was not the this didn't happen. It was more a matter of representing what we had as producers in terms of land. So we were getting grapes from our different estates at the time of the Marchesi and vineyards, of course, today. So to show the beauty of our land as a whole. Plus, we also in terms of winemaking, barrels were bigger, so you had to fill them and you needed more juice, therefore more fruit, and you didn't have the space in the cellar to do micro vinifications as we do today. So to me, this is the meaning of a classic Barolo, this double line, history and greater message, comprehensive message, which allow us to understand that Barolo is not only that powerful expression, but as Martina said, it can be also delicate, because we do have vineyards which are gentle and allow us this fresher expression of wine.
Okay, perfect answer. Last minute here, I love this question from one of our attendees. This is for everybody, for Valentina, Davide, Matteo, and Martina, but one gentleman wants to know, this is, when you don't drink wines from Piedmont, what do you like to drink? Putting you on the spot here, but
well,
I really want to explore.
You can admit it. It's okay. Okay.
Yeah, I really want to explore our beautiful nation. I mean, Italy, because in Italy you can find a lot of great wines, not only in Tuscany, because we know that Tuscany makes a very great wine, but also in other area like Sicily, like in Etna area, in Basilicata, so Puglia, in this amazing region that you can find in our beautiful country. So I really, when I go to the restaurant, I want to taste all of the wine that come from our beautiful nation, because each wine can really let you dream, because can really make you do a virtual trip in that region.
Well, that's very important now that you can't travel.
Exactly.
Dreaming is an important thing right now. So, Valentina, real quick, what do you like to drink?
The beauty about Italy is also the incredible number of local varietal that grow specifically in certain places, which are super interesting to discover. So besides Italy, which is already homework of itself, we try every time something different. We love France, of course, being our I'm going to say our next door. Yeah, it's quite easy to get there, but having had, just as Martina, we met probably more times abroad rather than here in the Barolo area. We met, on the street by working the market. I think that both of us had the opportunity of being exposed to a world that makes wine, and it's super interesting to try.
Great, thank you. Martina and Matteo, what do you like to drink if it's not Piemonte?
That's a good question. So I agree. I agree with Valentina and Davide. So I think it's very, very important to try different type of varieties from different areas. Generally speaking, probably because we are not making so many white wine. So when I go for dinner, I tend to order white wine. So in general, so it's I drink so many reds for work that generally speaking, I like to drink white wine from Italy or either France or of course champagne. So I go for something completely different from what we make.
Yep. Matteo, how about you?
During this day, we are battling the 18 Barolos. So
you have to stand. You have to be a little closer to the microphone, Matteo.
Okay. Now during this day we are battling the 18th Barolo, so we are tasting a lot of Barolo every day. So when I have to taste something, I like to drink some champagne during these days. But it depends.
Refreshing.
And I'm just putting up a picture of your Conca Barolo here. We didn't put a label before, so people can see that. So. Anyway, so I
think that we can go out for dinner as soon as they allow us. We will eat perfectly. Each one is a different wine.
Yeah, you have several dozen people watching today that will join you, so myself included. So this has been great. We covered most of what we wanted to, but not everything. But we only have so much time. But John Rootmaster says, "Take me, take me." Absolutely, assolutamente, John. So. Valentina and Davide, Matteo, Martina, grazie tanti. This was so much fun. I had a great turnout today, and everybody that watched today, we'll invite you later today or tomorrow. I have another Barolo webinar coming up about the great vineyards of Barolo. That'll be next week. You'll get the information on that. So, but thank you all. This was great. And
grazie mille.
I've been vaccinated. I don't know about the rest of you, but let's hope this all gets cleared up very soon and we can all travel to Barolo very soon.
Thank you, Tom, to allow us to see each other, because we're all closed in our homes, so we don't get out, and this was fun.
Exactly, it's true. We can do it tomorrow again. If you
want. Well, I don't mind. But
time tomorrow.
Right, but Valentina, as you point out, it's like you get to see people that are a 10-minute drive away. It's one thing to see me with somebody in the United States, but you're 10 minutes away, but you can't go there. So, but anyway, but thank you again.
Grazie.
Buona giornata. Ciao ciao.
Ciao a tutti. Ciao ragazzi.
Ciao ragazzi. Ciao.